You know, in the long history of invention, some secrets just fade away. They're lost to time. But others? Others are buried on purpose. This is the story of one of those. It's about Nikola Tesla's final, and maybe his most terrifying idea. He called it a weapon to end all wars. But the world's most powerful governments, they just called it a weapon they had to have. A secret that, quite possibly, he took with him to the grave.
That genius was, of course, Nikola Tesla, the man who literally electrified our modern world. Think about it. Alternating current, radio, so many things we take for granted. But on that day, he was 86. He was broke. And he was surrounded by not much more than stacks of paper. And, well, his secrets.
And here's where it gets strange. Before the world even knew he was gone, something was already in motion, something urgent. The US government moved in, and they moved in fast. And believe me, they weren't there to collect his personal things. No, they were hunting for something very, very specific. A piece of information so powerful, they believed it could change the entire course of World War II, which, you have to remember, was raging at its absolute peak.
What were they searching for? The blueprints for a death ray, a weapon of almost unimaginable power. And this wasn't just some rumor. Tesla himself had told the world about it. So the question that drove those agents back then is the same one we're asking today. Was it ever actually real?
So let's talk about this weapon to end all war. To really get it, you have to picture the world back in the 1930s. Tensions were sky high. Nations were building up their armies, fascism was spreading, and you could just feel this shadow of a huge, mechanized war on the horizon. And Tesla, he was a pacifist his whole life. He was horrified by it all. But his solution wasn't what you'd expect. It wasn't about treaties or diplomacy. It was about technology. A deterrent so powerful, so absolute, that it would make the very idea of war impossible. He had a name for it: Teleforce. Of course, the newspapers, they loved a good headline. They immediately dubbed it the death ray. But that's not how Tesla saw it at all. In his mind, this was a defensive weapon, a peace ray. Think of it like a massive energy shield, a particle beam that would make any country completely invincible. If you can't be attacked, well then the whole idea of an invasion just disappears. Now, Tesla was quick to point out that this was nothing like the death rays you'd read about in science fiction. He said those kinds of rays would just spread out and weaken in the air, like water spraying from a garden hose, totally useless over any real distance. His idea was different. It wasn't a ray at all. It was a beam, a highly concentrated beam of tiny little particles. Imagine taking all that water from the hose and firing it as a single solid bullet. That's the difference. Lethal, precise, even hundreds of miles away. And the way he said it would work is just mind-blowing. You'd take a stream of tiny particles, tungsten or mercury, and then you'd accelerate them using a gigantic Tesla coil. What you get is basically a man-made, perfectly controlled bolt of lightning. And the power he claimed it had, it's staggering. He said it could wipe out an entire fleet of 10,000 aircraft from 200 miles away. I mean, think about that. It was essentially the perfect weapon. Okay, so you've got this incredible invention, Teleforce, that could literally stop World War II before it even gets going. But there was one huge problem. Nikola Tesla was completely broke. He had the brains, but not the money. So to build his invisible wall, he had to go looking for cash. And that's how the world's greatest inventor ended up trying to sell the world's most powerful weapon. So what did he do? Starting in 1934, he began writing to world leaders. He reached out to the US, Great Britain, Yugoslavia, but the most significant contact he made was with the Soviet Union. And he did it through a company called the Amtorg Trading Corporation in New York, which, well, everyone knew it was a front for Soviet spies. And what was he offering them? Absolute total defense. But here's the catch, and it was a big one. Tesla had a condition, and it was non-negotiable. He demanded all the money up front, and he absolutely refused to hand over any blueprints. Why? Well, after decades of being burned by rivals like Edison and Marconi, he was, let's just say, extremely paranoid. He swore that the complete plans for the weapon existed in only one place on Earth, inside his own head. As you can imagine, most governments said, no thanks. The idea of paying millions for something that only existed in an old inventor's mind was just too risky. But one country was willing to take that gamble.
In 1935, the Soviet Union sent Nikola Tesla a check for $25,000. It wasn't the full amount, but it was a start, and more importantly, it was cold, hard proof that they were interested. Very interested.
And that $25,000 payment, it stuck in the minds of U.S. intelligence officials. So, fast forward 8 years, Tesla dies alone in that hotel room, and suddenly a terrifying question pops up. What exactly did the Soviets get for their money? Was it more than just a test run? Did the blueprints actually exist somewhere? And were they about to end up in enemy hands, right in the middle of a world war?
You see, what really had the government spooked was something Tesla himself had said back in 1937. He went on the record and claimed this weapon wasn't just a theory. He said, "I have built, demonstrated, and used it." He claimed he'd already tested a prototype. But then, nothing. No proof, no location, not a single witness. He just made this incredible claim and let it hang there.
This whole operation got a code name, Project Nick. FBI agents descended on the hotel and confiscated everything. We're talking 2 entire truckloads of his life's work. But very quickly, they realized something was wrong. They weren't the first ones there. The safe in his room, it was already open. Someone had been through his things before them. But who? Was it Soviet spies, German agents, or maybe even Tesla's own nephew trying to protect his uncle's work?
So, the government brought in the big guns. They assembled a team of the country's top scientists. Their one job? Go through 80 trunks packed with Tesla's notes, his drawings, his letters, everything. They were looking for just one shred of evidence, any tiny calculation that could lead them to the Teleforce weapon.
And after weeks of searching, what did they find? Absolutely nothing. Zero. No blueprints, no formulas, not one single piece of paper that even mentioned the particle beam weapon. It was as if the entire idea had never even been written down. The ghost in the safe, whoever it was, had left nothing behind.
So, where did it go? What happened to the secret of the death ray? With absolutely no physical evidence, all we're left with are theories. And honestly, each one's pretty compelling.
All right, so there are 3 main ideas. Theory number 1, it was all a giant bluff. Just a desperate last-ditch effort by a genius who is broke, trying to get money for his real passion, which was wireless power. Theory 2, it was a tragedy of timing. A brilliant idea for sure, but maybe 100 years ahead of its time. Something that was just impossible to actually build with the technology they had in the 1930s. And then there's the third theory, the one that's, well, the most chilling. That it was all real, and that Tesla himself decided to hide it from the world. And this next part is the key to the whole mystery. You have to remember, Tesla had an incredible eidetic memory, a photographic memory. He always claimed he could design, build, and even test complicated machines entirely in his head, without ever writing anything down. So if the complete blueprints for Teleforce ever really existed, they probably only existed in one place, inside his mind. And when he died, they died with him.
But here's the thing, his basic idea, it was spot on. Today, we call them directed energy weapons. And they're not science fiction anymore. They are a very real part of modern military arsenals, used to take out things like drones and missiles. So Tesla wasn't wrong about the science. He was just about 80 years too early.
Which leaves us with one final, haunting question. In the last years of his life, did Nikola Tesla look at the world, at this planet just rushing headlong into another massive war, and decide that humanity, simply couldn't be trusted with his most powerful invention? And you have to wonder, how different would our world be today if he had made a different choice?
What details stuck with you the most? I really do read the comments, so let me know. We're always digging up interesting stories. Subscribe to Fathom if you're curious about what we'll uncover next.